This is my assessment presentation. The idea of assessment is it is the process of planning, gathering, analyzing, and interpreting data for decision making. Assessment is used to benefit the student by gathering information and data to help the educators make decisions. Assessment data should guide educators in future planning and instruction. So my idea for assessment is seminars, or sometimes called the Socratic seminar, and this is a formal discussion that allows for teacher assessment, peer assessment, and self-assessment. The Socratic seminar is a student-centered approach to instruction and assessment for all grade levels. It allows for assessment in reading, writing, speaking, and listening. So students read or research a particular topic or a literary piece, and they take notes on a particular text, or sometimes they're given discussion questions ahead of time and they make notes. And so and they usually do it in a group, so there's a lot of reading, writing, speaking, listening already at the very first level. And then students use that evidence-based text for answers in a group discussion with speaking in a more formal discussion as opposed to pre-writing where they're in an informal discussing of the questions. Then they go into an actual seminar where it's a little bit more serious, and there are listeners that are assessing them as well. So the students listen to others' answers to build the discussion. In this type of seminar, the main goal isn't for everybody just to talk and say their answer, but to kind of build on one another's answers and to ask higher order questions. And so students will write those higher order questions to ask their peers in the discussion. So this promotes, again, higher order thinking skills, social skills, empowering the students, critical reasoning skills. It also helps develop their oral language and communication, as well as the use of academic language and discourse, not just in writing, but in speaking as well. Academic conversations are purposeful and sustained dialogue about school-related topics. They are the cornerstone for building literacy and learning. And so educators must present many opportunities for all students to actively engage in speaking and listening in an academic setting that are relevant, meaningful, and engaging. Academic conversations help to connect oral language to writing. They help to make academic language visible in both speaking and writing tasks. And so the research kind of already shows that if we have these opportunities for academic conversations as opposed to just the teacher speaking and the students regurgitating whatever the teacher says or writing down notes, not even speaking, that's not academic conversation in the sense that we want it as educators. We want academic conversations between the students facilitated by the educator. And so that can really be insightful learning. Here's a bit of a guide to the Socratic seminar. Students, again, beforehand will prepare researching and reading a text. Then on the day of the seminar, students in the inner circle will come in and participate, asking questions, going back and forth in dialogue, reflecting on what others are stating, engaging in responsive discussion. Students in the outer circle are silent. They are observers, and they peer assess their partner in the inner circle and kind of just give feedback afterwards as well. And so other seminars have had timing, so they're timed, or other seminars have what's called a hot seat, where one of the observers can go sit in the hot seat if they have a question as this discussion is going on. So there are many different ways, but this is the most basic model. Here's an example.
So I have a question for you guys. How do you think Hugh's thoughts would differ, or would they stay the same, if he was able to attend Obama's inaugural address? If he lived in this point in time, would his opinion be different, or do you think it would still be the same, that America still has never fulfilled the American dream?
Well, I think that I think it'll definitely be a lot more positive because a lot of like in lines between lines 19 and 22, Hughes mentions a lot like I am the poor white fooled and pushed apart. I am the Negro bearing slavery's scars. It's more negative, so I think it definitely be his views would definitely be a lot more positive if he saw Obama's speech. So
Yeah, I agree with Al. I think that back then, when Let America Be America Again was written, there were many advances that we haven't made yet. But now, since it's a few years later, we've made many different advances, but still not all. So I think he'd change a little bit, but not completely.
And so we can also see that there is an assessment by the teacher. One of the most like popular would be the AVID Socratic seminar, and where the teacher is looking for opening questions, core questions, and closing questions. And so when it relates to the text or they're using concrete examples, but then when they go into the core questions, talking about abstract ideas or theme and or leading to further questions. And then the closing, of course, is relating to self or reality, kind of taking that text, especially with like literature, and going outside and how does this apply to the 21st century, which in that previous example you saw was what they were talking about, like how does this literary text, and then coming into during the time of today as students and kind of bridging that gap for the literature. We also see that there can be a rubric. There are many different styles of rubric, but most of the time when you look at the Socratic seminar, you'll see conduct as well as speaking, reasoning, listening, academic language, stuff like that will be on the assessment by the teacher. Peer assessment, they often will have different questions on them, such as what is the most interesting thing your partner said. They can take, kind of just graphing out, putting a check next to anytime the person speaks in this discussion or refers to the text or asks a question or responds to another speaker and even interrupts another speaker. That kind of can help them see the teacher as well as the students see what the peer saw and how an observer sees what they're doing. Afterwards, you can do a self-assessment. The students can do a Socratic seminar kind of debrief. How did you feel about the experience? How do you feel about the seminar? Did you change any of your opinions? Some of them will often say, like, what was the best thing that someone else said that really got your attention? Maybe you didn't even agree with it, but got your attention. And so the teacher can kind of look and see all these different types of assessment, as well as assessing reading, writing, speaking, and listening all at the same time. Here's another one that is scaffolded.
I can discuss whether or not Confederate monuments should be removed by listening to my peers and using evidence.
By talking and expressing oneself, we learn more deeply. One thing we know from the science of learning is that complex instruction needs to be scaffolded, that students need to be enabled to take each step along the path. And in this classroom, we see a very sophisticated conversation being scaffolded to help them learn how to talk to each other about this very difficult concept in a very respectful and thoughtful way.
We've just finished a 6-week unit on the Civil War. They needed a safe space to talk about racial issues and justice issues. I decided a discussion would be the best way for them to learn about the issue, bring in evidence, and have their voices be heard. I sourced about 15 different articles to meet kids where they were at in terms of like length of texts or level of complexity of texts.
Part of the scaffolding in this classroom is that this teacher has found 15 different texts for students to read to prepare for the discussion so that they can speak with evidence and so that their evidence is accessible to them.
It's important to understand that even though somebody says something you might disagree with, everybody's contributing to this shared dialogue in this safe space. Somebody start us off.
I think Confederate monuments should be removed based on the Atlantic. It said establishing monuments to Confederate war heroes in turn celebrates men who committed treason.
I was very pleased with a lot of students who really came out of their shell.
I want to disagree with a lot of you saying that they're bad.
I
They're a part of
loved that there was healthy debate.
I don't know about the rest of you, but I don't want that in this country.
We need to find a way for each side to be able to see the opposing side's points instead of just argue them.
They were polite, they were encouraging, and I think it helps them understand that deeper understanding of history.
It's all in perspective. If you know it's wrong, then you can use it to create change.
So we're actually going to stop there. There were a couple people in the room tracking things from the conversation.
She's thought about the fact that some students may be more comfortable participating by tracking the conversation and then reporting out what they found.
Athen used evidence in a cool way. He brought up how...
So there are many ways for students to get their brains engaged and to be participating in this discussion. The deep conversation they've just had is actually extended by the fact that they get to reflect at the end in writing.
Tell me how your thinking is now changed after this conversation. It's okay if it didn't change, but you need to tell me why.
That reflection, which is metacognitive, really helps the students carry more learning out of the experience they've just had.
So here are some of the different ways you can scaffold. This is just a type of questioning cheat sheet. So again, those sentence stems, and it gives different ways to use them. We also see that a Socratic seminar can really elevate this type of status of instructional discourse because language is central to all content areas. And so because of this, just here are a few that the Socratic seminar, the anchor standards that it meets, and it's in reading and writing and speaking and listening. We can also see that, when we talk about the WIDA standards for the different English language development and the way of communicating, that this can be used across different content areas of study. Here are some performance definitions for the speaking and writing, and so teachers can track the growth in the productive language domain as well as the receptive domain by using these levels from the performance definitions. And here's just an example. The topic was a literature analysis, and the example context for language use was students listen to class discussions about themes, patterns of events, or character types in a work of literature to make connections to their own lives and or familiar stories or myths from their own cultures, and talking about the cognitive function of listening and analyzing this theme in literature. And so this would be a great context for a Socratic seminar for assessing that. Here are my sources. Thanks for listening.